Barstool Sports has an article out about an unfortunate snack coming out of India. It's an ice cream called Hitler. So let's take a look at some pictures here. Yeah, that's pretty unfortunate. So this is on top of a recent story that we did where there's a Hitler yogurt. Okay, and of course there's the infamous Hitler store. I'm sure you guys have seen this before. Now, what's strange is that in the article they make clear that in this specific case, since rural India has absolutely zero Holocaust education, and in many places they don't even have the internet where they could learn about it, that in this case they're legit clueless. Like, that's the tone of the article on Barstool Sports. Like, they're ignorant. To them, they just see it as like a Ronald McDonald character. They don't know where it came from. But it's pretty disturbing either way. And of course, then this spawns into a bigger conversation, a broader conversation about anti-Semitism in general. And the ADL last year had a really interesting poll, which really explains just how much anti-Semitism is still alive and well and thriving. So I want to give you some details on that. Here's what they say. Quote, more than 1/4 of those surveyed, 26%, harbor anti-Semitic attitudes, representing an estimated 1.09 billion adults around the world. Now understand, this was a gigantic poll of thousands of people in all these different countries, and they had many questions. I think there were 11 different questions about stereotypes of Jewish people, and they asked people, do you think this is true or not? And then people would respond, and the numbers show that more than a quarter, 26% of people have anti-Semitic attitudes. That's over 1 billion people in the world are anti-Semitic. They say, this I found astonishing. Only 54% of those polled globally have ever heard of the Holocaust. Wow. 54%. Among the 74% of those surveyed who indicated they had never met a Jewish person, again, 74% of people have never met a Jewish person? That's so hard for me to wrap my mind around because I'm born and raised in New York. I went to school with all kinds of people. There's a pretty significant Jewish population where I'm from. 74% of people never met a Jewish person, they say. They say 25% harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. Of the 26% overall who harbor anti-Semitic attitudes, 70% have never met a Jewish person. So, by the way, what's the little kernel of truth in there, which they don't, explain in more detail, but the idea is, if most people just met Jewish people, they'd be like, oh, yeah, they're regular people. Why the fuck would I hate Jews? So it's the same thing that goes on with all these different groups. If somebody's racist and then they, befriend an entire community of black people, or a black person helps them through a difficult time, or whatever. You never met a Muslim, but, you're hanging out with Muslims all the time, and okay, they're normal people. Same thing with Jewish people. Obviously, this should be obvious, but apparently people don't realize it and don't talk about it. So let me give you more specific numbers as to where you have the highest levels of anti-Semitism. In the Middle East and North Africa, 74% of people are anti-Semitic. That's incredible. In Eastern Europe, it's 34%. Western Europe is 24%. Sub-Saharan Africa is 23%. Asia is 22%. The Americas is 19%. Oceania is 14%. They also say, quote, among Muslims, which comprise 22.7% of the world population, 49% harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. That's incredible. That's half. In the Middle East and North Africa, the number of Muslims holding anti-Semitic attitudes is 75%. They say there are substantially lower levels of anti-Semitic beliefs among Muslims outside of the Middle East and North Africa, with Asia at 37%, Western Europe at 29%, Eastern Europe at 20%, and Sub-Saharan Africa at 18%. There were subsequently higher levels of anti-Semitic beliefs among Christians in the Middle East and North Africa as well, at 64%, compared with Christians outside of the Middle East and North Africa. So basically what we're looking at here is this. Christian fundamentalists, Muslim fundamentalists, and right-wing fundamentalists, like, for example, neo-Nazis and neo-fascists, which are on the rise in Europe, they're the people who provide a heaping dose to the world of anti-Semitism. The overall numbers are incredible, and we need to chip away at that. I mean, that's ridiculous how high. Only 54% of people heard of the Holocaust. Over 25% of people are anti-Semitic. That's absurd. No, very few people met Jewish people, because they're less than 1% of the world population. But let's face it, man, the main problem here is fundamentalism. Fundamentalism of all kinds. And we know what the solution is. We got to try to convince people not to be fundamentalists. And we got to try to convince people Jews are just like everybody else. I mean, it seems like such an obvious thing to say, but apparently people don't fucking realize it. And remember, we've spoken about this on the show before, but anti-Semitism is at a scary height in some places, specifically in places in the Middle East. But not only that, look at places. There's places in Europe where the Golden Dawn Party, for example, in Greece, they're so fucking popular, they won seats in parliament. This is a group that admits they're neo-fascists, admits they're neo-Nazis. Their symbol is similar to the fucking swastika. And they're just like a somewhat mainstream accepted, like, oh yeah, those are the right-wing people in Greece. And this is something you see in other places as well. I mean, there's other right-wing, neo-fascist, neo-Nazi groups that are gaining more and more popularity, especially with the increase of Muslim immigration into some areas in Europe. So we have a terrible situation on our hands. The scope of anti-Semitism is way worse than I think people would have guessed if you just asked somebody randomly. And it's incumbent upon good people to go out there and talk about this stuff. And remember, in conclusion, real quick, of course there's a tremendous difference. It's not anti-Semitic to talk about how you disagree with Benjamin Netanyahu and the right-wing policies of Israel. It's not anti-Semitic to be against occupation and to want a Palestinian state. So let's clear that up, that those are totally different conversations. So you can be on one side of that and also say, okay, we need to stop anti-Semitism and it's a real problem. And remember, it is a real problem.